He lost his job, he lost his home, and his house was at risk, and he still won, and here's exactly how. So today I want to tell you about a story of a student named Kris, because this story is going to punch you in the gut and remind you exactly why finances aren't just numbers, it's actually resilience. And why I love this story so much is because it reminds me of our situation we just went through personally. And if you want to hear more about that story, click in the top right hand corner and get the details of that story. So Kris was a Budgetdog Academy student. He had everything lined up perfectly. He was a graduate, so he actually knocked this out of the park and was doing so well financially. The momentum was building, he was financially on track, and him and his wife were building a life of their dreams. And then boom, everything happened. He lost his job, he tore his meniscus, a major hailstorm came through his neighborhood and destroyed tons of houses. And not to mention, he had a baby on the way within a month. And most people would break under this kind of pressure, but Kris did not. And there was one reason he did not. His finances were together. And so I'm going to share today why Kris felt good, although life came at him so hard, with 5 simple lessons. Lesson number 1, build a moat before you think you need it. When you have an emergency fund, you don't buy yourself extra cash, you give yourself extra time so that you can make good decisions for your family in a crazy time. Kris was obviously not expecting to lose his job, as none of us typically are, but it did stop, and he had to pivot very fast. And because he saved, he had breathing room. And as I shared recently, this is exactly what happened to our family as well when we lost our house to mold and mycotoxins, and we had to come out of pocket $300,000 unexpectedly. And that was within a matter of months, so you can imagine the type of stress that could have caused if we weren't in the financial position we were. And so Kris was able to pivot, use his emergency fund during this time, and in fact, he actually isn't getting a new job until August of 2025, so he had about a 4-month gap in between when he lost his job and when he was getting a new job, and his emergency fund was only 3 months. So you may be asking, like, how did he navigate those waters? So we talked about the situation. He said, this is a learning lesson. I thought it had little risk, but of course everything hit at the same time. When it rains, it pours. And so he thought initially he could have a 3-month emergency fund because they had little risk, they had no children, they had pretty good health, and their jobs were both secure. And as he learned the hard way, he realized he should have prepared more with a 6-month emergency fund, and so therefore he's going to be correcting that once he gets his new job. So the takeaway is prioritizing your emergency fund. You never know what's going to come at what time and how hard it's going to hit you, but a 3 to 6 month emergency fund at bare minimum is always a good thing to have, leaning on the high side of 6 months because you just never know what's going to happen. So what he did outside of that was he actually dipped into his brokerage account, which again was a good thing because he decided to invest heavily years ago. And as a result, he actually had a ton of liquid capital ready to deploy, even though the intention was not to deploy that capital for emergency purposes. So as a result, he decided to adjust to a 6-month emergency fund going forward once he got his new job, which is awesome. It's a learning lesson, but he was also prepared, was able to handle the storm, which is a good thing to see. Lesson number 2 is health is wealth. You don't realize how much your body is part of your financial plan until you can't use it. Kris's torn meniscus wasn't just painful. This could have sidelined him for opportunities down the road, especially if he was in a physical role where he couldn't actually perform his duties because of his leg. The crazy thing about Kris' story is exactly what happened to him has happened to us in the past. I've actually torn my meniscus myself, plus 2 other ACLs, and you're out of commission physically for quite some time. I found ways to get to the gym, literally with crutches, getting into the gym, having a partner spot me, different things like that, but it is very hard to perform with a torn meniscus or a torn ACL or something like that. So the takeaway is take care of your health proactively so you don't get in this position. Now, obviously, a torn meniscus is typically one event that causes that, but work on your injury prevention, your stress management, and eating well, because everything else is tied directly to your health, and the health costs that are going to pile up if you don't take care of yourself early in prevention stage are going to crush you later on in life. Lesson 3, you need adaptability, not just a plan. We've all had plans and they've all got ruined. Kris had a plan, but of course it didn't go to plan, as life usually doesn't. But a plan gives you a guiding light to get back on track and to see it when you're in a dark forest, to see the pathway forward, and you're going to get knocked off course. That is a given. That's expected. That happens to everybody. But if you have a plan, you can get back to baseline and you know where to head when you're knocked off course so that you don't wander into the forest and dark areas. So when everything fell apart for Kris, he was able to adjust. Obviously, first, he was able to use an emergency fund to handle here and now. And secondly, he was able to dip into a brokerage, which was already pre-prepared for if something accidentally happened. This was his early retirement, but at the same time, you're able to dip into this. And that's the cool thing about having a brokerage and being prepared, is it's essentially a secondary savings account. It's extra liquidity that puts you in a really good spot when things happen. This exact thing happened to my family when we lost everything and it cost us $300,000 out of pocket. We did not have all $300,000 cash on hand. What we did do was dip into the brokerage account, which saved us majorly. And once your brokerage account is large enough, although it takes you away from your initial goal, and you want to make sure cash handles most emergencies, there are things and times where $300,000 just isn't reasonable to hold in cash. And so the brokerage plays a major role in those situations. So the takeaway is life's gonna punch holes in your plan. And winning isn't about never getting knocked down. It's about being flexible to get back up and pivot when you have to. Nobody that's ever achieved anything meaningful had no knockdowns. Lesson number 4 is protect what you can't predict. You ever seen a hailstorm on a weather app and you say, oh, it'll pass? Chris's neighborhood got major damage. But the real lesson here is that insurance, and proper insurance at that, matters big time. So the takeaway is assess your protection that you have in your situation. What we talk about in Budgetdog Academy is that every single situation requires different types of protection, but everybody should know exactly what that protection is and how that actually suits them and what amount you actually need. Things like home, auto, life, disability insurances are all massively important and oftentimes things that are forgotten about. You don't need to be paranoid. You need to protect your money, as we talk about in the 3rd pillar of Budgetdog Academy in the Budgetdog framework. We first track our money to make sure we know where all of our cash flow is going. We then begin to grow it, and when we grow it, we have bigger risk at play. And this is something that you have to protect your money with, because you never know what's going to happen. But if you build a moat around your finances, you're unbeatable. Lesson 5, why you fight. Your why matters. When Kris looked at all the chaos that was happening, Kris doubled down. He could have easily folded, but he didn't, because he had a baby coming and he knew his why. The takeaway is money goals only matter when they're actually tied to something, not just more money or higher value. You actually have to have a reason you're doing what you're doing. For me, it's my daughter. It's my daughter's health, safety, and overcoming Dravet syndrome, and making sure I can provide for my family. So you need to take some time to define your why. This could be a walk in the woods, a walk on a trail, a walk with your wife. Maybe you go to the gym for a little bit and sit in the sauna. Whatever it is to get you in your zone of thinking, you need to think about your why and tie that to your money goals. This is your family. This is your legacy. This is your future. And it's on you to change that. And that's what's going to give you fuel when you get knocked down to your core. And that's what's going to give you ammunition when you fall down on the ground really, really hard. Because there are times where we as humans want to give up. That is natural. But we have to build a very strong why so that we get up every single time. One of the core values within Budgetdog is do not fear failure. When you get knocked down 8 times, you get up 9. That's an expectation we have. Kris's story reminds us of life is going to come at you quick, and there's never a perfect time. You're never going to feel ready to start with your finances. You're going to have storms, you're going to have setbacks, and things are going to happen. And if you expect to wait till those things are done, you're only going to continue to have storms. If you have the right mindset, the right systems, and the right why, you're going to be wildly successful, even though you will get knocked down. So I hope you took this to heart and used Kris's story as motivation to start today. If you really want to get serious about your finances, go in the show notes below and book a call with my team to take this to the next level and be done with being in the same spot that you have been. I will see you next week. Budget dog, budget